whole thing crashes, it'll be a disaster.
You're listening to the Bible Thumping Wingnut Show, the show that's safe for the whole family. Unless your family contains professing atheists.
Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we may have a new crazy apologist on the block. I present to you Bible Thumping Wingnut.
Probably be pretty cool to play the original video of this when we're doing this on a Google Hangout.
Bible Thumping Wingnut is manipulative, dishonest, ineffective, and completely incapable of seeing women as equal human beings.
Hey, Bible thumping wingnut, stay in your man cave and keep studying the book written in the Bronze Age.
Well, what have we got here? What do we have here? Bible thumping wingnut.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast. I think this is episode number 99. This one is a Google Hangout. Ooh. Normally a Matt Slick Hangout. Matt Slick is not here this evening. He's traveling. Joining me is Andrew Rappaport from Striving for Eternity Ministries, as well as Len Pettis, Mr. Bible Thumping Wingnut himself. And we are going to review a video tonight and take our time going through it. And after that, we'll open the room up if anybody wants to come in and share, challenge, or add to the conversation, whatever it is you want to do. So we'll be sharing that link later. And let me say right up front, whether you're watching this live in a Google Hangout or delayed or on the iTunes Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast feed, the video we're going to review is made by a non-believer, and it contains a few swear words. So be advised, when we are actually reviewing the video, it's not edited out in any way. So you don't want to play it in your garage when your 11-year-old daughter is listening as you're working on the car. So that happened before. So we have Andrew. What? Give us an update with Matt Slick. What's he doing tonight?
Well, Matt has this weekend has been out in I think it was Seattle. He was debating a Muslim. They actually had two debates. One, why am I not a Muslim, and one, why am I not a Christian? And so basically, I think those were the two positions that were had. I heard things went well, as I would expect with Matt. Anyone who knows, before Matt does a debate, he spends weeks memorizing everything that he's gonna, all the passages from the Quran that he's gonna use. And if you've ever seen, he could, when he's having those memorized, he could do that rapid fire. He just has a memorization system that works very well for him. And I'm sure that he did very well. Heard from some folks that he did. So we're waiting to hear when he gets back how it went.
How's Len Pettis?
He screwed this whole thing up, dude.
What did I do?
This is episode 100. What's the matter with you?
This is 100.
This is 100.
Where's the cake? Did you guys? I don't know if you know. You remember the?
Hello. I feel like we need to start over.
Remember the show On the Box with Ray Comfort?
Yes.
They on their 100th episode, somebody, not going to name names, had the idea of putting a cake with 100 candles on it. That were those candles that you can't blow out. You blow and they just relight, which is really smart to do right underneath the fire alarm. And so 100 candles, and Ray's trying to blow them out, and they're relighting. So what does Ray choose to do? He takes the script from the show and tries to put the candles out with paper. Not exactly the smartest thing.
The numbering for the podcast is really funky the way I do it. Episode 99, the numbers are based on the RSS feed, the SoundCloud, when they're loaded on SoundCloud. So episode 99 was just posted 35 minutes ago. Episode 100 will be recorded tomorrow night by Len Pettis and myself, and that will go up on the RSS feed on Wednesday. And technically, this would be episode number 101 before. So that's the funky way that we do this.
So you missed your anniversary.
No,
episode.
The way that they're put out on the RSS feed is the way that we number them. So, I guess we should mention we are now not only streaming on a Google Hangout, but also we're on the Mixler feed. We just confused Joe Lanza, which, sorry, Joe. Maybe you could go back and listen to it over and over again. Maybe it'll make sense. Maybe I won't. But we're also live on Mixler right now, broadcasting. So if I know some of our listeners don't have the best internet, and Mixler takes up very little, so people can listen on their devices over there as well.
And also, you last time you left the Mixler up for the after the Hangout went off the air, and people were able to listen in on that. Good conversation we had with an Australian gentleman that went on till 3 in the morning our time in the East Coast. It was a good conversation. It was interesting at one point. I think, Len, you were there at that time, where I just ended up asking him what were the books behind him, because he had a whole bunch of some pretty good Christian books, some maybe not so good, but he had been studying and just hadn't gotten answers, and so he was able to sit and talk with us and get some questions answered.
Well, and you could try to talk. I didn't notice you were cutting in and out. I noticed your video is frozen right now. Len, speak. Well, when you do come back, turn your camera off, I guess.
Well, I think this would be a great time to review the video we want to review, so we can get all the reviewing in before Len steals the good lines.
No, I want him to come back. So tell the audience what some of the comments, while we're waiting for Len to come back, tell those that are listening some of the pre-broadcast comments that you were reading there, Andrew.
Well, our friend the Cat's Meow was commenting that before we even had gone on the air, 25 minutes after posting when the Hangout would start, there were already 4 dislikes. He, of course, was joking and said, wait, only 4? Come on, atheists and other irrational unbelievers. You're getting lazy? It should be 7 by now. Come on, where's the hate? I'm not feeling it. But it is kind of funny that they don't allow evidence to get in the way of their hatred. They can say they dislike something they haven't even watched yet. I do think that's interesting.
Yeah, they're good at that. They know what they're going to get, so they know they're not going to like it. Len is rebooting his computer, which gives us time to talk about your contest that you had in your giveaway.
Yeah. Now, now with your cool new camera angles, do you have a way of, or are you trying to do that to bring up the picture, the winning meme?
No. Well, you'd have to send it to me.
Oh, it's on my Facebook wall.
Why don't you explain the competition?
All right. So we had a contest for whoever was going to create a meme that basically contained, and there were some edits done where people chose to word it differently, as the winner was, where to say there are no atheists, there are only suppressors of truth. We had a winner. I was actually surprised by the winner. Mary Jo LeBlanc won, even though she was one of 3 different Yodas that were done. Her meme says, "Atheists there are not, suppressors of truth they are." She will be winning a copy. Let's see if I can do this without the glare. A copy of Audacity, the special 2-disc version. Hold that up. So that is the special 2-disc version. Has the behind the scenes. That will be going out as soon as I get her address. So we had about 100 different memes that were being posted on the on my wall and on the Bible Thumping Wingnut wall. Those 2 places, we were having a lot of fun posting those. I did find it interesting how some people were getting upset. There we go. There is the winning meme. Tim is on top of this. The new cameras and all. So you're going to have to talk, though, probably, to get it to show up. Or
I clicked on it. It's a lot of work keeping up on all these things, and I'm new to it. But there it is. You got your scrolling Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast in green going over your strivingforeternity.org. But
looks good, though.
I can't figure out how to make that green thing stop. But
See, you started it, now you can't stop it. I thought that was that actually wasn't. It was funny because it wasn't one of my the ones I thought were the better ones, but that was the one that got liked and shared the most, by twice as much as any of the others. Even though there were 3 different Yodas, I thought that would actually water down the Yodas. But while we're waiting for Len, do you want to talk about what we got coming up for Fridays?
I'm sorry. What did she win? What did you give her?
She won Audacity, the new movie, the special 2-disc version of Audacity. So it is a special version with behind the scenes in it, which was pretty good. I watched the whole thing. So
cool.
That will be going out soon.
There's Len missing on the video feed there. That's awesome.
We get a nice flicker effect.
It's great when people drop out and you've got things set up a certain way.
I hope when he comes back in, it's going to pop back in. The new technology. So Friday mornings, when you're going to be starting the new addition to the podcast, right?
Yep, that is starting. Going to be sometime in September. I was actually messing around with the disc you gave me. I started editing the first episode that's coming on. So for those of you who don't know, the Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, the Google Hangouts go live on the RSS feed on SoundCloud Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then the Tim and Len Bible Thumping Wingnut podcast, where we talk about whatever we want to talk about, that goes up live on our RSS feed Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. And beginning in the middle to end of September, we're going to start a 3rd podcast, and we're featuring Andrew Rappaport's teaching on hermeneutics, over 20 lessons. And that's going to be uploaded in live on Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do the 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time thing because that is when SoundCloud switches to the next day, and that's we have quite a few listeners in Europe. So we make that so it's up in the morning for them, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So what can you tell us about those lessons, Andrew?
Well, the ones you're working on first are basically 20 lessons. They're about 50 minutes each, roughly. And basically what it's going to do is help people to understand how to interpret the Bible, which, as we review the video we're going to review in a little bit, that would have been really helpful for the guy who made that video to learn. Because this is a problem not only within Christianity, but clearly with those that are not Christian, that do not know and do not understand the rules of interpretation, or at least follow them. But this is a major problem that you see in the church. One of the biggest problems we see in the church is that people interpret the Bible by experience and not following the rules of interpretation. As with any language, any literature, there is a rules that you follow to interpretation to come to the right interpretation. We're basically going to teach people what those rules are, when do you apply which rules, and explain those. And also, actually, we start the class with explaining some of the Bible tools that are available. We live in a generation where we have so much available to us, especially here in America, and it's something that we should take advantage of more, and people don't utilize the tools that we have in this generation, just the plethora of just Bible software, websites, all of that. So I think Len is back now.
He's back, but it's still not working. So I think we're going to go ahead and start without him. So everybody will be disappointed. I'm disappointed. So anyway, this video came about, well, my attention to the video. I knew about it. We talked about maybe reviewing this last week. But last week's hangout was called The Gospel of Jesus Christ. What is it? I think that's something like that. And we had quite a few listeners, quite a few people listen to that this week. And a lot of comments, a lot of people interested in that. And this is a video that talks about vicarious redemption and why it's stupid. It's by... I know people will be upset with me. The guy changed his YouTube channel to TMM, which is, I think, forgive me, folks, it's what is his name? Oh, he changed it to TMM, so it's his fault. TMM stands for the Messianic Maniac or something like that. I don't know. I apologize. He changed it to TMM, so it's TMM. He's got 31,000 subscribers, and so I don't think we're going to affect his. Probably all the non-believers who listen to this, watch this, they already subscribe to him. So I watch his videos, and he's coming from obviously an atheistic perspective, and we'll go ahead and listen to this.
There is some foul language both on screen and in the video, just so people know ahead of time.
Hey, let's wonder if we should get Matt Yester in here to take Len's place since he's having issues. Ask him if he wants to come in.
All right.
Shall we go piece by piece or go through the whole thing?
Well, let's play through the whole thing, because there's actually some overall things, and then we could do it piece by piece, and we could wait while we're doing that. Matt Yester could maybe join in.
All right. So here's the video that we're looking at tonight.
Whenever I point out to Christians how stupid it is to believe that God sacrificed himself to save us from his own wrath, they say things like, "You're guilty of sin. Someone has to pay the price for your crimes. He can't let these crimes go unpunished. Jesus took the punishment for your sins so you could be saved. It's just like if somebody paid your fine for you." Christians often cite justice as an explanation of vicarious redemption, and may even give analogies relating it to our actual justice system. But these analogies are never very comparable to what vicarious redemption actually entails. Let's suppose our justice system actually worked according to the Christian paradigm. It is the case that someone can pay someone else's fine. We do allow that. But how would we react if there were a judge who tells convicts, if you worship me and accept me as your savior, I'll pay your fine for you? Or what if that judge even agreed to subject himself to the convict's prison sentence and allowed the convict to go free? Would we consider that justice? If the convict committed a crime against a victim, would the victim accept that? Would we ever allow a judge to do that? Obviously not. If Stalin accepted Jesus as his savior just before he died, would that really make it right for him to get into heaven? The Christian paradigm of justice seems to follow the logic of scapegoats, sacrificial lambs, and whipping boys. Back in the day when a young prince would misbehave, only the king could punish him. If the king wasn't around, the prince would have a whipping boy who would get whipped in his place. You don't see this very often today, and any reasonable person who encountered it would say, that's really fucking stupid. And they'd be right. It bears no resemblance whatsoever to any rational concept of justice. Yet this is a concept of justice that is central to Christianity. Back in the day, someone did a video with the Christian YouTuber Brock Lawley, aka the Atheist Antidote, and they asked him if he thought it would be more fair if, when you got to heaven, you had to wait at the gates until every person you had ever wronged went in ahead of you. I wasn't able to find this video, so if anyone remembers this and knows which one I'm talking about and can dig up a link, that would be great. What Brock said was very interesting. He said something like, if fairness is what you really want, then maybe Christianity isn't for you. This is one of the few things upon which Brock Lawley and I agree.
All right, so that is the video in question. Brock is a Christian guy. I mirrored one of his videos once. You see, I've never talked to him. He seems to be pretty spot on, especially with dealing with non-believers, professing atheists. So, overall comments from the start, Andrew Rappaport. First off,
well, I mean, overall, you see a couple main issues. One, the fact that the starting point of the gentleman doing the video is that he's God and not God is God. So, I mean, right off the bat, you have this issue where he is talking as if he's setting the standard. You know, in all honesty, I don't mean this. I know the professing atheists are going to go nuts with comments, but I don't mean this to be derogatory. This is just what this seems to me when I see people like this. He seems like a child. Now, I'm not saying that he's childish, not saying that, but when you have a child that thinks that he gets to make the rules, they come up with really strange logic to justify their making of the rules, because that's really what they end up wanting, and that's sort of what he's doing. And I understand, just like a child, a child is unaware that they think that the rules they're making should be the rules that apply, and this should be the rules of the game. And any parent knows that their child has done this to them, where they catch them doing something, and their child will justify what they're doing and think that this should make sense. Like, you should actually applaud me, Dad, Mom. Look at what good things I'm doing when I'm disobeying you. Or as if Mom or Dad don't have a right to correct them. Well, the reason Mom and Dad have the right to correct a child is because of a creation principle. They're the offspring. This guy's problem really is that he doesn't understand he's not the parent. He's not the one making the rules. And so the reality is that you end up seeing this with children that, you know, they think that it's unfair when a parent doesn't let them do what they want. You know, they want to raid the cookie jar and the parent says no. That's somehow wrong for the parent to say no. And they will come up with reasons why it's a good thing, that how they're being good and should be praised for, you know, raiding the cookie jar. And that's really what this is. This gentleman is not understanding who God is and why it is that we submit to his rules. He's got the justice system backwards. His argument is that we have a justice system and that God's system should fit our justice system, and that's backwards. The only reason we human beings have a justice system is because God is just, and He made us in His image. And part of being in the image of God is that we, from His nature, have an understanding of what's just, of right and wrong. And Tim, you've dealt with this plenty of times with Matt and Cy and plenty of others. When you talk to people, the fact is that if you're going to be a professing atheist, where do you get your morality from? You would not have a justice system. Show me the whale's justice system, or the giraffes, or any of the animals. You want to say we're closest to monkeys? Okay, where's their justice system? They don't have one because they're not made in the image of God. So right off the bat, he's got it backwards, and we could dig into this as we piecemeal it. And then the third thing that I had is this idea of the prince's whipping boy. Totally has nothing to do with what he's saying.
We're going to go through it.
Yeah.
Piece. So, I don't know if you wanted to get into what is vicarious redemption? First off, before we start over, go through it.
Well,
statement by statement.
Yeah, I mean vicarious, meaning that it's through someone else, right? So that we get our redemption. And this would be, Christianity would teach that we get redemption through what Christ did, okay, through another person. What Christ did vicariously, what He did, it gets applied to us. And the video is saying it's unfair to have somebody pay themselves for the crime, and that again is a misunderstanding of what it is that happened in that transaction. That when we piecemeal that part, I'll get into that.
Okay, it's interesting to point out. Here are some other videos of his.
Yeah.
How to make money with God, and that's a wretched. He reviewed a wretched one. Oh, brother.
Yeah.
Oh, so let's start over. Len Pettis is having problems, so who knows if he'll be back. But we will be opening this up. We will be letting guests come in. It's pretty interesting. We've got 40 plus hangout audience in our audience, and then we've got 13 in our mixer. And conversations going on everywhere. Pretty cool. So here we go. Okay. That's the end of it still.
Yeah, you got to go back to the beginning.
There we go.
Whenever I point out to Christians how stupid it is to believe that God sacrificed Himself to save us from His own wrath, they say things like, "You're guilty of sin."
Okay, stop there.
It sounds like whenever he mentions this, people witness to him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is, look at what he's saying. He thinks it's stupid. Right there, he sets himself up as the standard. He's the one judging he set himself up as judge.
Mm-hmm.
What criminal doesn't do that? Maybe the reason they say you're guilty of sin is because they're pointing out every man in prison thinks he's innocent and can justify why he's innocent. It's always the lawyer did it to him, or the judge did it to him, or something like that. But the reality is, when you look at what he's saying here, that God sacrificed Himself to Himself. Well, okay, stop there. We don't want to get into a Bible study here per se, but that's not actually accurate. Is the Father God? Yes. Is the Son God? Yes. But it was not Himself to Himself. The God who created the entire universe out of nothing is greater than our ability to understand Him. And this gentleman, I think, is suffering from trying to put God in a box that he can comprehend, that he can understand. So God has to be understood by Him. So He sacrificed Himself to Himself. It's not that. It is that the Son sacrificed Himself to the Father, not for the Son's wrath, but the Father's wrath. So it may seem to a professing atheist as semantics. Theologically, that there's big differences there.
And you know, it's worth pointing out what the scriptures say about his attitude about this. The scriptures say that it's foolishness to those that don't believe. And I know it's a rather convenient verse, and the atheists may mock that verse, but hey, it is. It's absolute foolishness to those who are dying in their sins.
But it shouldn't be, because of the fact that those professing atheists love to tell us that we can't comprehend or understand or properly define things like evolution. It doesn't matter if people have degrees. I recently had someone say that Jason Lyle doesn't know what he's talking about with astrophysics, even though he has a dual PhD in the subject, and the person I was talking to doesn't. But by virtue of Jason Lyle not agreeing with the conclusion that's supposed to be accepted, therefore he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's the thing. They argue the same thing. So any of the people that want to argue, Tim, that you're wrong for saying that they can't comprehend that or they can't understand that because that's exactly what God said, they're guilty of the same thing.
Is Len, are you able to weigh in?
I'm not even sure where the conversation is right now, to tell you the truth.
Okay, I'll weigh in for you, because this is what you were going to say. You were going to say, well, atheists never let the truth get in the way of their opinions that they share. So it doesn't matter that so-and-so has a PhD. The atheists are just going to, ignore the facts and just speak their hatred towards those who are Christians. That's pretty
well. Notice the, he doesn't even make an attempt to understand Christian doctrine and his misunderstanding of the triune nature of God and being one and being three in person to himself. That would be, if we were trying to argue evolution, saying, look, I don't have to know anything about science. They would reject that. That would be a big problem for them. And it's a big problem for me when these ignoramus atheists who, well, let me just, to kind of paraphrase Matt Slick, you don't, how does Matt Slick say this? You don't know how to think things through, right? So that's basically what I think of when I hear him start off with a fallacious premise from the very beginning. He's not even attempting to deal with the subject in an honest way. He's not attempting to deal with the God which Christians worship. And he's had it explained to him.
I'm going to jump in on you, Len.
He doesn't.
I'm going to jump in on you, Len, because you're breaking it.
Escape mechanism.
Well, James White says, when he debates somebody, he seeks to understand the position, and then he picks and speaks to the best arguments. Okay, not the worst. And I think some atheists, well, I think many professing atheists, what they do is they choose the worst Christian arguments, the worst Christian apologists, and they go and they use that and they try to refute that. Isn't always a difficult task.
Well, I think a better way to phrase what you first said, though, Tim, when you're speaking for Len, because it not only exposes what it's really about, but also drives professing atheists nuts, is that they don't allow facts to get in the way of their religious belief. And they hate the reality that what they have is a religious belief. And they'll argue, no, but that's what it is.
All right, let's go.
Let the comments fly. Maybe Nico SD will start be insulting some more, and we'll get the clown guy on to make about 50 more different profiles so that he can comment on himself.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Len dropped out.
I see that. So let's switch to this screen, and we will continue.
For your crimes. He can't let these crimes go unpunished. Jesus took the punishment for your sins so you could be saved. It's just like if somebody paid your fine for you. Christians often cite justice as an explanation of vicarious redemption, and may even give analogies relating it to our actual justice system. But these analogies are never very comparable to what vicarious redemption actually entails.
Okay, let's stop there for a sec. I don't know if you could scroll back so we show that quote. And actually, while you're scrolling it back, someone in the comments had a good point. This gentleman makes the mistake of, he's saying he's not sure who's the actual judge, whether it's Jesus, the Father, or the Son. But here, look at what he's saying here. He's referring to the justice system. So he talks about this vicarious redemption being, and that we Christians supposedly reference our justice system. Point being, though, is where do we get our justice system from? We get our justice system from God. That's the whole point. So it's backwards. It's not that we take our justice system, our human justice system, and then compare it to God. It's that God created, God is just, and because he's just, we get a justice system from the image of God that we have from his nature. That's where we get the idea of justice from. The professing atheist has no way of explaining justice. They can't. Justice can't ever be absolutely just. It's just whatever the society says or whatever the rules happen to be made. So they can never honestly, if they're going to be consistent, say that what Hitler did was wrong. What Mao Zedong did was wrong. Well, actually, they really can't say what Mao Zedong did was wrong because he did it under the name of atheism. Stalin, well, he too. They can't say these things are wrong because that's what society accepted. Now, we would end up saying that with these people, even though their society says it's right, we all know that these things are wrong. And the reason is because we have an understanding of what justice is from God. That's the point. So when we look at the justice system, it comes from God. Now, when he's describing the justice system, the judge can allow for someone to pay the consequence of another person. And as he's going to say in the next clip, that yes, we allow that. There are some rules in that, though, and it's perfectly fine and perfectly legal, but we have that because it comes from God's nature and what God entails. So let's play just the next slide that he has, and then we could talk about that one.
Comparable to what vicarious redemption actually entails. Let's suppose our justice system actually worked according to the Christian paradigm. It is the case that someone can pay someone else's fine. We do allow that.
Okay, let's stop. So he's right there. We do allow that, but there are rules in that, okay? I happen to know this because I happen to go through this with somebody who was going to prison. He was made an offer. So the rules are that I offered to do his jail time for him. In that case, here are the rules. 1, I had to be innocent of the crime. 2, I have to be in a right state of mind. Okay, I understand some are questioning whether I'm ever in a right state of mind. Gotcha. But the point being is you have to understand both what the consequences of what you're doing and be in a state where you're not doing this because your life is about to end, and you have to have a reason for doing it that is accepted by 2 different people, the judge and the person that's consequence you're paying. In the case where I was, it was accepted by the judge. It was not accepted by the individual. So he had the choice of paying his jail time or I pay his jail time. That is allowed in the justice system. Okay, he's correct when he says that we could do that, and we do allow that. Now we allow that, but he's in the next clip. He's gonna now kind of go and make a mistake. So why don't we play the next part and we'll look at that.
All right, let me get that screen up here.
Fine, we do allow that. But how would we react if there were a judge who tells convicts, if you worship me and accept me as your savior, I'll pay your fine for you?
All right, stop there. And look at what he's saying. Right there is the mistake. This is the core part of his argument. Okay? He's right that we do allow a judge could pay the fine. In the example that he wants to give, the judge could pay the fine for the convict. That's allowable. Okay? But notice what he's saying here. That the judge is saying, if you worship me and accept me as your savior, I'll pay your fine. That's not exactly what happened. You see, we should be worshiping God not because he paid a fine for us. We should be worshiping God because he's God. Because as God and the creator of the universe, he has the right to be worshipped. Just like a parent has the right to be obeyed by his child, in a greater way, the God of the universe, the infinitely holy, infinitely just creator of the universe, has the right to be worshipped by his creation. And that's the mistake he's making here, is we're not worshiping God because he did this act on the cross. We do worship him for that, but that's not why we should be worshiping him. He has the right to demand worship because of who he is. And this is the thing that a professing atheist has a hard time with, because a professing atheist hates God. He doesn't want to accept him. He's back to that illustration I gave earlier of the child. The child does not like the rules of the parent. That spoiled child is going to be upset with the rules of the parent and going to say, no, this is the way it should be. You should accept my rule. That's the reality of what a spoiled brat does. And that's really what we end up seeing here. We see a case where we see this guy misdefining, as Len said earlier, just not taking the time to, if he's going to attack Christianity, do it with proper theology. Okay? God deserves worship because of his nature of who he is. That's why he deserves worship. It's not that he demands it because he paid the fine, not because of he paid vicarious redemption for us. And he's not giving us the choice of, hey, you get your fine paid because I did this. No, he paid the fine. The problem is we're already guilty, and that's the thing that this video is making the mistake of. We're already guilty, deserving the punishment. It's not that God's saying, well, hey, I'll let you off if. There is no if. It's God who does the work in us.
And there's no if you, which implies you must do something. If man does something, then I'll pay your fine for you.
Correct. And that's exactly what I was just trying to get to. Yeah, because what you have is he's saying there's a condition here. There is no condition with salvation. God saves us. That's it.
Yeah, he's refuting Mormonism at that point because he's basically describing a works-based salvation.
Well, more than just Mormonism. I mean, Mormonism, Catholicism,
Islam.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really, though, it is this conditional, but this conditional salvation is what you see in every man-made religion. That's how you know the difference between a man-made religion and a divine-made religion. Every man-made religion has man having the choice, atheism. Man has the choice to rule his own life or decide his own destiny, whether he's going to be in a right state with God. The only religion that is divine is Christianity, where it says God made the choice, God does the saving, God gets the credit. And so it's not that God gives us a choice in a courtroom and says, well, hey, if you believe in me, if you worship me, if you accept me. No, God does the saving. And this is a problem that the guy doesn't understand. And this is the whole part of his whole argument is based on this key. So here's his premise. When you're talking in a logistical, in logic, you're going to sit there and look at these things, break it down. What's his premise? Here's his premise. Well, his premise is flawed because the premise is invalid. because it's not accurate. Therefore, the rest of this video is now proven illogical. It's not a valid logical argument. Why? The premise is flawed. He's attacking a straw man. So he's implying, and he's probably not aware of it. I'm going to say that I think that he is just unaware because he doesn't study Christian theology. And so he's using man-made thinking and man-made theology to explain what he's having trouble with.
All right, we will continue.
What if that judge even agreed to subject himself to the convict's prison sentence and allowed the convict to go free? Would we consider that justice? If the convict
stop there.
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Does it matter if we would consider that justice?
Yeah.
He's talking about how God works. And then he's saying, well, would we as people, would we consider that a justice?
Let's correct that. Would we as criminals?
Irrelevant. That's completely irrelevant what he thinks. It's what God says that matters, not what he thinks.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. I mean, we go, if he wants to go to a courtroom scene, a justice scene, what criminal sits before a judge and doesn't argue for his innocence? And when the judge, I'm trying to remember the case with the one woman who the judge sentenced her, and basically told her she was guilty of a crime. He sentenced her, and she basically cursed out the judge and said, "You have no right to talk to me like that." And he added like an extra 10 years to her sentence, saying, "I have every right because I'm the judge." And then he added to the sentence for her behavior. And that's exactly, that's the picture that we have here. He's arguing, no, it's not fair. The judge can't do this. The judge is the one who makes the rules, whether we like it or not.
Right.
I may agree with this guy. I don't like God's rules all the time either because I'm subject to them. But yep. I don't get to make them.
Okay, let's go to the next frame. We're about halfway through this. Well, yeah, about halfway.
It's pretty short.
Consider that justice? If the convict committed a crime against a victim, would the victim accept that? Would we ever allow a judge to do that? Obviously not.
Okay, stop right there. Okay, so he's saying, would the victim accept that? That is a really interesting thing because the reality is, for most people, the answer is no, they wouldn't. Why? Pride. It's a simple thing. I find it amazing how many people will understand the gospel, but then admit, as we had last week on this Google Hangout, after we went live, we had a gentleman from Australia, and this is exactly his point. His point was he could not allow. He knows he's guilty. He knows he deserves hell, and he cannot allow even God, Jesus, to pay the fine for him. And he said he fully understands this means that he would spend eternity in the lake of fire, but he said, I'd rather that than have someone else pay the fine for me. And we ended up pointing out to him, that's right, and that's the pride that you have to repent of. That's the very thing that we have to repent of when we have to turn. We turn from pride, from that pride that tells us that it's going to be our way. This is the issue. It is our pride that keeps us condemned to hell. Okay, because we're not willing to accept what God did for us. But that doesn't mean that everyone's not going to accept it. When he says obviously not, would a judge allow that? And he says obviously not, that's blatantly not true, because I know from personal experience watching a judge accept this. Okay, now I also watched a victim not accept it, but had he accepted it, there wouldn't have been a problem with the judge. The reality that you see here is you have a case where he's arguing from a state of that everyone must have the same pride, and God can work to humble a person in such a way so that they can come to repentance. Okay? That's the missing element in what he's arguing there. So
what about this, Andrew? I wouldn't say that God is a victim in any way, but when we think about the characteristics of the victim. That's the person who is being wronged, correct? That's
Correct.
the person. So ultimately, although I wouldn't ever refer to God as the victim, but God is ultimately the one in whom we are sinning against, first and foremost. So he's referring to as a victim, but would God accept that?
Well, you mean would God accept the victim status, being called a victim, or
No, but okay, in his framework, the one being wronged is called the victim, but biblically speaking, the one being wronged is God. Now, would God accept this form of justice? And the answer is yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, God clearly would accept it because he did.
It's his economy. It's his justice economy. So
yeah. And I mean, in a sense, it is, you know, not that he's a victim. Let's use victim in the proper sense. God was the one that was wronged. When we break his law, he's the one that's wronged. But he also happens to be the judge of the system, and the perfect judge, because he knows everything.
Right.
And I don't know much of the second half of this video is really him just talking about some other guy. So we'll probably skip through a fair amount of that. But now he's going to get into his Prince's whipping boy argument.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Do that? Obviously not. If Stalin accepted Jesus as his savior just before he died, would that really make it right for him?
Okay, let's stop there.
I mean, does he just like change the topic completely just now?
Yep.
Did he completely just change the topic?
But look at the irony of this. Okay, if Stalin, well, is Stalin any better than this guy or me or you? No, Stalin just was able to get away with more of his sinful nature. But in the guy that made this video, if he's a professing atheist, he should have no problem with Stalin. Stalin was an atheist. Stalin, did what he thought was right in his own eyes. And how could this guy say he's wrong? I mean, look, Stalin's quoted as saying, you kill one person, it's murder. Kill 1,000 and it's a statistic. He saw no difference. One of the things that when you study Stalin, he saw no difference with killing a chicken and killing a human. That was a lesson he learned when he was a child. It's just a matter of statistics and bettering the human race. And that's the reality. Okay? So, but how could this guy say Stalin is wrong? What makes Stalin wrong? What does this guy have to appeal to say Stalin is wrong? He has to appeal to God. That's the reality. He's appealing to God's justice to say that Stalin is wrong. That's the irony of it. So he in here you end up seeing that he is actually in his own argument refuting his own argument, because he wants to say Stalin is wrong and it wouldn't be just to let Stalin off. But he has no standard of justice, because any standard of justice that he comes up with can only be a relative standard of justice, and Stalin would be right by that standard because his community, his followers accept it. And so you can't appeal to an absolute, and that's what he's doing. He says, if Stalin accepted Jesus as his savior just before he died, would he really make it to heaven? In other words, that's just a wrong situation. This can't happen because Stalin is a bad guy. But by what standard? You see, he's appealing to an absolute standard by saying that we all would accept that Stalin doesn't deserve heaven. But Stalin deserves heaven just as much as I deserve heaven. I don't deserve heaven. There's nothing worthy within me that deserves heaven. The only reason I would be in a right state with God is because of what God did, not what I did and not what Stalin does.
Right.
And so if Christ chose to forgive Stalin, yes.
because we have someone, Paul, previously Saul of Tarsus, who was a murderer of Christians, of God's people, who at the early part of the church, he was killing them, hauling them off to prison. He calls himself the chief of sinners because of that. And yet God saved him. Was Stalin any worse because he killed more people? Well, technically, Stalin didn't actually kill anyone. He just gave the orders. Paul did. Paul was involved in it. So when you sit here, you have to get to what standard is Stalin absolutely wrong? God's.
Well, and here's more perspective on that is that it's the scandal of the gospel, right? It's scandalous to think that somebody could be so evil, so bad, yet just accept Jesus, which isn't actually an act of man. It's an act of God for God to grant repentance and faith to someone. It's whatever God decides to do. But what he's saying here is that I'm better. I am better. The atheist is proclaiming, I am better than Stalin, and you're telling me that I'm not going to go to heaven. You're telling me I'm not going to go to heaven, but Stalin, if he just prayed a prayer, he's going to be in heaven? Now that is a ridiculous gospel. That's what they're saying. And they're saying that because they believe that they are good people. And I said this last week. I do believe that many atheists, first off, I do know that God's word says that God exists. You're suppressing the truth. And you're going to rely on, if you go before the Christian God, you're going to go ahead and say, hey, I was better than, I was better than, I was better than, and you should grant me heaven. You shouldn't send me to hell because I'm not that bad of a person.
Yeah, and the reality is the gentleman TMM who's making this video, the reality, you don't deserve heaven any more than Stalin. But if you repent, you could be forgiven. It is a misnomer to think you're better than Stalin, because in God's eyes, you're the same criminal. You're just as bad. We could sit and go through God's law and look at it, but these guys have heard it. It's nothing new to hear, because he already said in the very beginning, they say that I'm guilty of sin, so he knows it.
All right, let's continue. Len Pettis is back.
I am. I kind of wanted to weigh in on this slide right here, because this is a person who not only doesn't understand justice, he doesn't understand mercy. He doesn't understand the gospel, that no sin is so big that it's unforgivable. Not just a Stalin, who killed 30 million people. I think he was credited with killing during his reign. But what about the mother who kills her one murder for abortion? Even that can be forgiven. The homosexuals can be forgiven. I can be forgiven. Andrew Rappaport can be forgiven. So that's what he doesn't understand is just the goodness of the gospel. Not only that, but the other problem that he and any unbeliever has is that no sin is so small that God can just overlook it. No sin is so, we can just give that a pass. I mean, one act of disobedience in the garden sent all of creation under the curse.
Because of federal headship, which is another issue he doesn't understand.
Exactly. So this person, not only does he not understand justice, he doesn't understand mercy, he doesn't understand the gospel. Everything he thinks he knows about Christianity is not Christian. He doesn't understand anything.
All right, let's continue.
The Christian paradigm of justice seems to follow the logic of scapegoats, sacrificial lambs, and whipping boys. Back in the day when a young prince would misbehave, only the king could punish him. If the king wasn't around, the prince would have a whipping boy who would get whipped in his place. You don't see this very often today, and any reasonable person...
Okay, so let's stop there, and then maybe we could just skip over the foul language and go to the next slide or previous slide. But the reality of what he's saying there with this whole whipping boy thing, is it based on a sacrificial system? Yes. Why? Because that was a picture of something. That was a picture of, you know, what Christ was going to do. But this idea of the whipping boy, I don't know where that comes from. I mean, I don't know I've never seen this ever in history, in any of the history that I've read, where princes would have a whipping boy that would take the punishment for them. But notice how he does this, and notice the tactic. Logic of scapegoats and sacrificial lambs. He takes two things that are accurate and then throws in something that has nothing to do with what he's saying, so that he could jump off of that and then start addressing that. It's a straw man, because it's not a whipping boy. What he's describing as a whipping boy is not what's defined as a scapegoat and a sacrificial lamb. Okay, why? Because goats are not human. They're animals. He probably doesn't understand that difference because he probably believes in evolution. But the goats and lambs are not made in the image of God. Okay, so he goes from one thing and then jumps into to try to give logic to something that now he's going to make is his main point, which is this whipping boy thing. And I don't even understand this whole the prince's whipping boy, because that's not what's being described. In the Gospels, it's not that the prince brings out someone else to pay the consequence. It's that the prince is the one taking the consequence.
Yep.
And so it's you know, he makes this analogy and then gets it wrong for what he's trying to describe.
Further demonstrating that he's a glittering jewel of colossal ignorance.
Well, I mean, look, he's ignorant. He's ignorant to Christian theology, and
willfully so, might I add, because there are plenty of places he could go and learn this stuff. There's a lot of good YouTube channels where he could go and learn proper Christian theology, and simply chooses not to. Like we said earlier, we're not going to let the truth stand in the way of his faulty narrative.
Well, and this is the thing. Look, if you want to disagree with me, come disagree with me. Give me God's word. Give me Scripture. Give me accurate theology. I mean, when I wrote my book on the different religions, what did I do? I wrote it on Judaism. I went to a bunch of rabbis and said, okay, this is what I'm saying you believe. Is it accurate? What am I doing? Not only am I doing the research from their belief, but then I'm going and getting it checked by authorities in that. Same thing with Catholicism. Went to a cardinal, went to imams. So what did I do? I validated it. So when I say this is what they believe, I can sit there and say, well, look, these are their documents that state that. And to check to make sure I wasn't taking it out of context, I went to people and verified it. But these guys don't do that. What they do is if they do any research, they're researching for the purpose of tearing down and ripping apart. That's why they research. And so when they do that, immediately, you know, when someone that does the study says, no, you're getting this wrong, they should stop, if they're going to be honest, and go, oh, maybe I need to correct this and get it right. When they refuse to do that, they just show that they're being dishonest, which basically just invalidates their entire argument. You know, because if dishonesty, this is the reality. Why do I think that atheism is so lacking? Because all they have is dishonesty when they attack Christianity. And if the only thing you have in your argument is dishonesty, it shows that you can't even defend your own view. I mean, we got a guy in the you know, YouTube channel right now he's been begging for weeks. He makes all these videos from these hangouts, makes videos of me begging me to respond. I won't respond for a simple reason. He wants attention. He's like a little child. Okay, he's older than me from the looks of it, but he's a big baby that just goes, look at me, look at me. Someone pay attention to me.
And you just did.
No, because I didn't mention his name. Yeah, and then we got a bunch of clowns in there, literally, and they just want attention, but they're not being honest. If you want me to engage with you, here's what you do: be honest about what I believe. Then I'll be happy to engage with you. I'll give you an example of someone that on this channel that we've done that with, and that's Chris Mouty. I enjoy my interactions with him. Why? Because he takes the time to honestly try to understand what we believe. You know, he gets it wrong, but he at least takes the time.
All right, so we skipped the file language, at least the first one, and the current screen reads that this bears no resemblance whatsoever to any rational concept of justice. Yet this is the concept of justice that is central to Christianity. And of course, my apologetic says, wait a minute. How do you get rational?
Yep.
How do you get rational?
Right.
God, and how do you get justice?
You just stole my thunder. Where do you get rationality in a world without God?
They're completely sitting on God's lap to try to slap him in the face. You cannot. Folks, just know this. There's no reason for any concept of justice or even any belief or faith that you are being rational apart from a creator God who created all things, including your brain and including the morality you know. Without that, you've got no video. You've got no argument.
And so we've dealt with this plenty of times, but I do want to point something out. Look at what he did, because this is for any Christians who are watching that you're going to debate with these professing atheists. Watch the tactic he just did. Let's break this down and look at what the tactic is so you can recognize it. He starts from the truth, right, the sacrificial system, jumps to this whipping boy example, gives an explanation of the whipping boy, and then look at what this says, that this is the concept of justice that is central to Christianity. No, it's not. The central theme of the justice of Christianity is not the whipping boy analogy that he made up. You see, and what often happens when you do this, you have to be aware that this is what they do, and it's slid in debates and discussions, and people don't pick up on it right away to see that this is what happened. He did a bait and switch. That's all. He's trying to switch it out, so that he can make this the argument, so that he can kind of win in his little mind, and win the debate in his mind. But this is not the central concept of a whipping boy. Is not the concept of justice in God. Okay, it's as we've discussed. I don't want to repeat because we want to get some others in, but it's basically justice is from the nature of God. We can only get rationality and justice from the nature of God. They can't account for it, yet clearly he's appealing to an absolute standard of justice.
Right. Okay, let's see what's left. I'm not sure.
Yet this is a concept of justice that is central to Christianity. Back in the day, someone did a video with the Christian YouTuber Brock Lawley, aka the Atheist Antidote, and they asked him if he thought it would be more fair if, when you got to heaven, you had to wait at the gates until every person you had ever wronged went in ahead of you. I wasn't able to find this video, so if anyone remembers this and knows which one I'm talking about and can dig up a link, that would be great. What Brock said was very interesting. He said something like, if fairness is what you really want, then maybe Christianity isn't for you. This is one of the few things upon which Brock Lawley and I agree.
Okay, so
this is this idea of fairness in Christianity. I mean, I don't know who this Brock guy is, but Christianity is fairness. This other guy's system is not. The reality is the only way, if we're done with the thanks. I was going to say I don't like the derogatory term towards my friend Sean there. But you talk about fairness. If you don't like fairness, Christianity may not be for you. Christianity is the only place you're going to get fairness. You're not going to get fairness in an atheistic system that is arguing that Stalin should be punished, but TMM should not. Why not? I mean, why? Because TMM isn't as bad? That's the reality. TMM may be far more moral than the three of us here.
but he's still a criminal in God's sight, just as much as Stalin. This is, we talked last week on what is the gospel, right? This is the difference. The fairness that we have when we say the fairness in Christianity, what makes Christianity unique is that it is the only system, the only religion that you have where God does the work, not man. Second thing that makes it unique, it is the only religion that is both, that can merge both justice and mercy. This guy wants mercy. He wants to be let off for the things he does wrong. He wants it to be excused. Even as a professing atheist, he understands that he wants mercy. But the reality is that he can't get mercy in a just system if he's a criminal. He must pay the crime for the crime. That's the reality. Like it or not, we're all in that situation. That's the reality of it. And what makes Christianity unique is the fact that what's called imputation, this is what the gospel is, and this is what this guy's having trouble understanding. Imputation is that at that cross, Jesus Christ, Almighty God, being an eternal being, took the eternal punishment upon himself and gives to us his righteousness. Okay? For the believers, that's 2 Corinthians 5:21. Christ, who knew no sin, becomes sin that we might become the righteousness of God. That's what the gospel is. It's a transaction that occurs when God takes our sin and gives us his righteousness. And he does it. As the judge, he has the right to do that. This is what the gospel is. And it's not that you're a better person, TMM, than me. You may be morally, in human standards, a better person than me, TMM, right, is what it is, TMM. And so whoever the TMM is, he may be more moral. But the reality is, what standard is he going to look to? He's going to look to himself as the standard. Put yourself at the perfect standard of God, the absolute righteous standard. We're all guilty. And we all need to turn from that pride. He even recognizes it. It's our own pride that says, no, I will pay my own fine, or I want to be in control of everything. And because of that, I'm not even going to let the God of the universe, who gives me breath in my lungs, tell me what to do. And that's the reality. That's what we end up seeing, is that people don't even want the God of the universe to tell them what to do. And they want to make the decisions. And that's the issue that really has to be understood. The gospel is that if you repent from your pride and turn to Jesus Christ and accept what he did on that cross, you can have eternal life. And whether you want to call me all kinds of names, that doesn't change the truth of that. Whether you don't like it, doesn't change the truth of that. Whether you think you're smarter than me, doesn't change the truth of that. Whether you can make funny, videos and make fun of us, that doesn't change it. You may feel justified in your insults, but the reality is your insults only prove that you can't account for your worldview. Because if you could, you'd argue intelligently. This video that we have is not an intelligent argument. It's a logical fallacy, because he's doing straw manning, and he's playing games with things and not getting things accurate in definition. And so because he has two premises that he lays out in there, one's a straw man and one's inaccurate, the whole thing is invalid. Now, if he'd like to make an attempt, I'd be happy to engage with him and we could talk about with it, properly defining it. But he's got to get that right first. That's what he's got to do. So that's what would be my encouragement to him.
Okay, I'm going to just post the link to join. We'll see what happens next. But in regard to fairness, Andrew, I think what Brock probably was referring to was the fact that if God gave us fairness, it would be fair for God to send all of us to hell. Would it not?
Well, if God defines fairness, yes. Everyone should go to hell. His argument, though, is Stalin should go to hell, but he should not. And that's not fair.
Yeah.
He thinks he should be let go, yet he's a criminal.
Yep. All right. Well,
so we're going to open this up now.
Yep. We're going to see what happens next. I don't know how long I'm going to go because I do have to
get up early in the morning. As
usual. Len dropped out. Again, you must have said something that offended him.
I try. I try. If there's any way I can offend Len, I try to do that. It seems that there's some folks in Mixler who are discussing slavery. They could join us if they want to come on over to the YouTube channel and get the link. Maybe drop it into Mixler too. We know that we have some regular commenters on YouTube who would never join because, well, monologue is so much easier. It's so much easier to use insult instead of intelligent debate. And I don't know how much longer that when you go off, I got to see since I have company that just walked in. But Rocco's here.
Yeah, I just added Rocco if he wants to speak. How do you like this, Andrew Rappaport?
I saw that. I like that and the T-shirt. I'm an atheist. For those that don't understand Greek, a means the negative, so a theist is not a theist. So the shirt says I don't believe in atheists, meaning they're a atheist, a non-believer in atheists. Good shirt. I do like that little. That for those that don't know is that you're showing is a postcard invitation to the Striving for Eternity Academy, which will be live on Bible Thumping Wingnuts Friday mornings, 8:30, starting in September.
And if you want to get a T-shirt, which I know everybody wants to get a T-shirt, they can go to Absolute Apologetics and go pick one of those up. And I know the professing atheists, they have a T-shirt that says I'm an atheist.
An A.
They've added another A.
Okay. They're an atheist.
Yeah.
So as typical, all the atheists could do is copy what Christians do and try to mock it. Come on, come up with your own ideas.
Right.
Mockery seems to be all they have, and what they think is counts as legitimate discussion, and it really exposes how weak their own points are. It's funny because they always argue the presuppositional argument is so stupid, it's so easy to attack, it's so easy. But you notice they don't even attempt it anymore. They just use mockery. It shows how weak their own argument is, and it shows that they can't respond to this.
Yeah, I had a comment about the video.
Sure, go ahead, Rocco.
Yeah, it seems like the video was was trying to attack God's justice when actually the whole video was attacking God's mercy. And what I mean by that is one of his arguments was how ridiculous we would think it is for a judge to pay the fine for someone else, and how we would not view that as justice. Well, in a sense, no, that's not just. That's mercy that the perpetrator is getting, not justice. He's getting mercy, and we need mercy. We don't want justice as sinners. So I think the whole video was really attacking mercy and not just God's justice.
That's a good point, and from that perspective, he's taking issue that Stalin could be shown mercy.
Yeah, exactly. He has a real big problem. Obviously, if Stalin could get mercy, how ridiculous is this religion?
Right.
That's really what he was trying to communicate. So, I think the whole video was disingenuous from the get-go.
And again, that goes back to what Brock said at the end. If you want fairness, then you don't want mercy. So Christianity's not for you.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that so many of the professing atheists want to argue as if they want heaven. They don't want to be in heaven.
You know, they talk about like the fairness, you know, whether God's fair and stuff. You don't want to be with God. You want to be, you know, call it what it is. You hate God. Why would you want to sit there and talk about God's fairness and that He should be fair to you, as if He should let you into heaven because you think that's fair? But I think you're right. It's His mercy that they're really going after there.
Can I throw in a quick thought also?
Sure.
Go ahead, John.
It's interesting because the whole video that you guys just reviewed totally lined up perfectly with the debate that I witnessed yesterday with Matt Slick. I was fortunate enough to get to actually see it there. And
that's right. You got to give us the update on that.
Oh, it was great. Matt went pre-sup on him, and the Muslim didn't know what to do. It was awesome. It was just awesome. But anyway, back to my point was that the Muslim had the same argument as just what this video was the fact that it's not justice, you know, for somebody else to take the blame and pay the fine instead. And he kind of made a point. It's like, well, I mean, nobody would accept that. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks. The question is, if you were in the shoes of the guilty man, would you or would you not take that free gift? And I think every man, every person would say, well, yeah, I would take that. So it was really interesting how this video totally lines up with what I saw yesterday from the Muslim.
Yeah, you got something funky going on with your audio there, John. So, but thanks for that update.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. We're going to go a little bit longer. Anybody else want to weigh in who's joined here? Silence.
I think Alex is going to jump in.
Yes, you probably remember me from last week.
Yeah, I
hopefully.
do. I figured
Excellent.
you would jump in.
Yes. Well, and again, maybe I'll take it to the same lines that I took it last time, and try to argue from the position of, okay, let's assume that your point of view is correct. What does that actually mean? And what I mean by that is, if you think about the original sin, right? Nothing that we do or nothing that happens would go against God's plan, correct?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So nothing that we would do or nothing that happens will go or can go against God's plan, correct?
Well,
everything, right?
Yeah, so this is going to be where Matt and I disagree with some of the stuff that he talked with you about last week. All right, okay. So this gets back into the view of God being eternal and God being omniscient. So God is outside of time, and it's you're thinking that because He knows something will happen, He causes it to happen. That's not the way it works.
Well, how can someone do something that goes against His plan then?
Alex,
because He must have a plan.
Let me weigh in. Let me weigh in, Alex. Okay, and then I'll let Andrew go ahead and fill in whatever he wants to say. Alex,
sure.
How much does God control? Okay, He's all powerful. He knows all things. He knew all things before He created us. Okay.
Okay.
He knows whether you're ever going to repent and trust Christ as Savior. He knows that.
Right.
How much does He control me? Does He control me?
No.
Wait. Let me finish, Alex.
Okay, go ahead.
How much does He control? Does He control me knowing that I'm going to put my hand up here and do that? Did I have any free will at all? I have no idea. And you know what? It seems like we have free will, but we also know some of the characteristics of God that have been revealed. What you need to stop doing is stop worrying about how much of a puppet are we, and just think, okay, I know that I do bad things, And God has provided a way for me to receive grace and mercy through His will and what we perceive as our own will. How it works, we don't know. We don't understand a lot of things, how they work. You don't understand how matter came to be. You don't understand how life began. Does that mean you just abandon all of science?
No, but the point I was trying to make wasn't necessarily...
I'm playing off something you said last week also.
Correct, yes. And I, at some point, if we have time, or if you'd let me, I could get back to that as well. But going to the whole original sin and salvation, what I was trying to get at is, by my understanding, there was no way for Adam to sin without God wanting him to do so. For whatever reason, whatever that reason may be, if God did not want Adam to sin and eat from the apple of the fruit of knowledge, he wouldn't have.
So what's your point?
So my point is, if he did that on purpose, why? If he, that was his will, why should he punish Adam for doing his will? That is my question.
And sorry,
go ahead.
It's your hangout, man.
I'll let you go.
Well, I mean, I'm going to give you the same answer we gave you last time. You're struggling with the fact that you think you should be able to completely understand God, and you won't. And so
no, I don't want to understand God per se.
You won't. You
right.
can only understand what God's revealed to you. You and I.
Sure, but
it doesn't matter how intelligent we are not going to have the mind of God, because you and I are temporal beings. We live within time, and we learn through observation. And you're applying your way of thinking to God.
But okay, so let me get back to the thing that I was talking about last week then, because I kind of had a...
Okay, let me ask this of Tim then first. Let me ask this of Tim. Sure. So there is a guy, Hogtie Champ, that said he needs a second to get back to a keyboard, but if he has a question related to the video, do you want to take that and then get back to Alex, or has Alex got a question from the video?
Well, I don't know how long you want to stick around. I know when Hogtie shows up, he's got more than a few minutes worth of material.
Okay. Well, we could stay with Alex then. Yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying last week, information or temporal existence, right, information is necessarily temporal. You cannot have information without it being a sequence within time or a change in time.
Why?
If, let's say, you took the entire Bible, all the letters that comprise it, and you put it into one spot, does it not lose intelligibility? Does it not lose information?
That didn't answer the question.
Because that's what information is.
Because you have an ability to learn through observation.
But I'm not learning. I'm just reading information. I'm looking at information.
Information to you is over time.
Yeah. I didn't realize Hogtie was here. And Alex is just being argumentative. He's not even referring to anything that we talked about.
That's why I didn't know if Hogtie had questions about the video itself.
I didn't realize Hogtie was already here, so I've added him to the broadcast. How you doing, Hogtie?
Hogtie may need a second or two to get unmute himself. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, too many buttons. And then I gotta, even though I'm wearing the headphones, you can still hear the echo, can't you? Because I gotta hit that button too. There we are. My goodness, thank you, gentlemen. I try to squeeze in the last bit of dishes before charging back. How are you guys?
Good.
Good. Now that I see the pictures on the wall, I remember you.
More famous the penguin pointing at me inexplicably, more famous than this face.
No, actually, the handprints behind you.
Oh, and the handprints, yeah. I tuned in maybe 10 minutes ago, so I just caught the end of you guys talking about this video, and I'm not even sure what video that is. And then now I see you kind of introduced me as like, oh, I wonder if Hogtie has an observation about that video. So awkward, because I didn't see it. But I can make one observation blind anyway, and that was picking up on your point, Andrew, about kind of desirable features of a system of justice for the universe, right? So we could have two different conversations here. Like you could say, "Hey, Hogtie, how would you like the universe to work?" And I could sit back and say, well, wouldn't it be great if the universe worked this way or that way? And you might have your opinion, we might agree, we might not. Fun, but who cares? Because we're in the universe we're in, right? And I think sometimes some of these discussions on YouTube and the videos kind of encapsulate one and sort of talk about it in the framework of the other, and it's a little bit weird. I don't necessarily even offer this as sort of like, well, here I can explain it to you guys, or here's some advice for you, but more advice for the non-believers that want to put up videos that say, here's what's wrong with the God belief. Because if the God belief is true, this creates circumstances for an awfully unjust universe. Because, well, that's your opinion, but who cares if that's the case? Most Christians won't, especially evangelicals, will not yield that ground. They won't say, I'm very specific ground, Andrew. They won't say, well, yeah, I agree with you that if God is just super evil and a total tyrant, well, then there's nothing we can do about it, right? Because that's not your position. And please don't think I'm coloring that to be your position. I have, in the time I've been doing this, I've had one Christian say straight out, hey, look, if God's evil, too bad. You know, it's his town. But that's certainly not the Christian position. So I would encourage the atheists who want to sort of make their point on YouTube that when you're making that video where you say, here is why my understanding of the Christian conception of what God is doing with this universe, why I don't like it, then make sure you say that what you're describing is what you don't like, and not that you believe it anyway. Because the evangelicals pick up on that pretty quickly, and they say, well, whatever. In terms of the...
Yeah, well, I'd want to encourage you, because you're right. I mean, this is a thing that I've often said with folks when when I did when I did debates with Muslims, and the Muslims sit there and they're going to explain Christianity and they get it wrong. I had this happen at one university, where I had this very well-known Muslim apologist, but he's describing Christianity, and every Christian in the room knows he's inaccurate. They recognize that immediately. Well, what are they going to do? Every Christian in the room is basically ignoring everything else the guy says because they know he is wrong on his premise of when he describes what Christianity is. I've had the same thing with rabbis that I've been in debates with, and so this is the reason I went through the effort when I wrote my book to make sure that I wasn't going to be able to be told that, and I went and got it checked by people in those systems. If you can't be accurate with it, then I mean, here was the thing. I had a debate that was trying to be set up back when I worked at Bell Laboratories, and we had a guy that had his own atheist TV show, and he challenged me to a debate on TV, and I said, hey, that'd be great. Here's the one thing. I want to argue atheism, and you argue Christianity. And he went, why would I do that? I said, because what we're going to expose is that I understand atheism well, and you don't understand the position that you're arguing at all. And he wouldn't take the debate. And I said, if you won't take the debate, then you should never debate Christianity because you don't understand it. And I'd have a lot more respect, and I do respect those guys who do at least try to understand it. And I do have some professing atheists who I'm friends with who they don't do YouTube videos and things like that, but they are trying to understand it accurately, at least before they try to criticize it.
It certainly takes time to learn. I know that you're dealing with a really rookie guy when he says something like, well, you just want to be Christian because then you're allowed to do whatever you want. You can just do whatever you want and then ask for forgiveness. So he starts laughing. I'm going for the spit take now. But
I have more control than that. I'm not going to... Yeah, you did see that. I just drank water.
Yeah. I'm not doing that timing on purpose, but yeah, no, you hear somebody say that, oh, well, that's why, because you just want to sin and then ask for forgiveness, or just do whatever you want and ask for forgiveness, and that's so far removed from really any variant of Christianity. It's just, but that you don't see a lot of people, like once they've been in the discussions for even a year, they tend to not. They hopefully would get out of that, but yeah, there's still more to come after that. And Tim, I welcome a time limit. I accept your observation/criticism that I can be a bit long-winded, and then right after I came in to a half-full room, it's now completely full, so I'll accept a direction of a time limit. I mean, the reason that I noticed, I'll tell you what I was going to call about, and then you see if you guys want to go back and talk about the video, that's fine, but I just noticed that Andrew, you've mentioned the presuppositional argument a few times over a number of broadcasts, and sort of typically presenting it as like, boy, this is the knockdown. Like there's just nothing for this. And who was, I guess it was John was speaking a little while ago, and when asked about how this thing with Matt Slick and this Muslim went, I guess it was yesterday that debate was, he was like, oh, it was awesome, Matt precept him, like boom, you know, like you guys talk about the precept like it's a wrestling move. He went off the top rope and precept him, like I mean, it's crazy. So did you want to help me out with this precept argument? Do you want to walk me through it? See if I've never seen your take on it, is all.
Well, mine is real simple. It's that I hold the two presuppositions. There's a God and He has spoken. You know, the issue is when we really look at this, you and I both agree that there's laws of logic, correct? Okay. We both would agree that we have an ability to reason. Maybe we don't reason well, but we have an ability to reason. Not it's not the process of reasoning, but the ability. And I'm making that distinction because often when I talk to professing atheists, and I say professing, I know you may not like it, but
I don't care.
Yeah. So the reason is because when we get into this, I talk about an ability to reason. Where did that come from? And they jump to the process of reasoning, and those are two different issues. And that becomes the same thing that we ended up seeing in that video where the guy, now's my turn to make you laugh since you're drinking. But I didn't get you laughing hard enough, oh well. But the thing is that it's, you know, you see this jump from one thing to another to avoid having to answer. So we're talking about an ability to reason. We're talking about laws of logic. We're talking about things like morality. Where did morality come from? Things like truth, knowledge, all of these things that are immaterial. Now, I understand that some people are going to argue, well, these are a process of the human brain. I've been dealing with this on Twitter all week with a bunch of professing atheists that have been, you know, well, it's a product of the human brain. And with each one of them, I go, okay, let's go back. You and I both agree there was a time before human beings, correct? Okay, you're shaking your head yes. So, and I know you have it muted, so I'm just telling it for those that listen on the podcast or listening on Mixler. So we both agree that there was a time before human beings. So let's go to one of the first laws of logic, the law of non-contradiction. Okay? And let's go before they're human beings and examine, could the universe have existed and not existed at the same way at the same time before they're human beings? So the law of non-contradiction is you can't have A and not A at the same time in the same way. That's basically what I'm doing with the universe, saying A and not A being universe and not universe. So the universe existing and not existing at the same way in the same time before they're humans. Could that be possible?
Well, I'm with you so far, and like you could make that about any proposition. I see that you're saying that about the existence of the entire universe. I mean, it could be, you could make any proposition like if the statement there exist protons, right? You could say, well, could there exist protons and not exist protons at the same time? Or you could say it about anything. Of course, you get the problem of, well, there was no name for protons, but let's move past that stuff.
Yeah.
I accept this logical verity that whether or not we're here to think about it or ponder it, right? Let's take a look at the materialist view that there was no human brains, no human minds, no human society, and heaven forfend, at some point in the future there's going to be a comet hit, or we're going to blow ourselves up in nuclear warfare, whatever it is. At some point the universe will continue on in its dusty ways without us being present. This logical verity underlying the thing we call the law of contradiction functioned or existed or was accurate representation of reality. It was back then, it is now, and probably is going to be well after we're gone. I absolutely concede all that stuff, yeah.
Okay. So I think you're in agreement that the law of non-contradiction does not require a human mind then, right?
I'm wary of walking down this road because of my last appearance on here. The law of non-contradiction refers to a human conception about a system of thinking about things, and therefore could only exist once people began thinking, and furthermore once they began thinking about thinking. But if you're talking about the logical verity, the underlying nature of, you know, A can't exist and not exist in the same way at the same time, that underlying logical verity, yes, of course. So the only thing I'm taking careful to object to, ever so slightly, is when you say the law, that is the human-formed laws of logic, that's came after us and will disappear
The
once we're
description
gone.
of, yeah, I agree.
It's
I agree.
trivial.
The law, yeah. But the point being that I use that to point out is that the human mind was not necessary for the creation, maybe of the terminology, but not the law itself. That things
I like
are
that.
contradiction.
I like that. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and so the reason I go to that is because what that does is that removes the human from it, which is what most people have to rely on, because if it's not a product of evolution, and the only way it could be a product of evolution is it's the human thinking, then what do you have? It's either a product of evolution or it's a product of God. Now Matt, and I think Matt did this last time with you, was to go through his way of going through it, where you if you prove, if you have God and not God, and you prove that not God's not an option, then God is, and that is logically a way of doing having discussions and showing something logically. What I'm trying to do is say that with the presuppositional argument, the question becomes is the very first thing that we're going to be doing, you and I right now are doing it, we're applying reasoning, right? So we're showing we have an ability to reason. We're using intelligence, we're talking truth, we're talking from knowledge, we're talking morality, because there's a right and a wrong in some of the things that we're saying. We're using laws of logic, all of these things that are immaterial things. So the question becomes, where did they come from? What created them? And so you have the choice of either they evolved or God. And so if they did not evolve, and if in fact if they could not have evolved, then God. And so the main point of the presuppositional argument is that the first starting point that all of us, you and I both, start with is that we rely on God. Even to deny God, you have to rely on God to deny God. And this is, and a lot of, even some Christians that use this argument or quote this verse don't do it right. In Psalm 14:1 it says, "The fool says in his heart there is no God." And many people use that and explain that when they talk to people that deny God. But why is the person called a fool? It's not because everything the guy does in life is foolish. It's because the fact of to deny God requires a person to use their God-given ability to reason that God does not exist. But if God didn't exist, they wouldn't be reasoning. So you wouldn't be able to even deny God if God didn't first exist. Okay? And so it becomes this thing of you're relying on the very thing that you're trying to deny in your denial. Okay? And that's where the presuppositional argument really is, because where its starting point is to look at what it is that people, where their starting point is, and the starting point must be God. Some people, you'll hear them explain it this way, is that without God you can't know anything. Now, the reason I don't word it that way is because the way that someone in, from maybe your camp, a professing atheist would argue is, well, I do know things. Well, you're right, you do know things, but that's the proof that God exists, the fact that you do know things. So the proof is right in front of you. Now the question is, do you suppress it or do you not? And that's why I say there are no atheists. They're suppressors of truth. They're people that they rely on God to deny God, and they suppress that because they just don't like God. Let's not reject what's clear in front of us just because we don't like where it's going to go. So when we look at this, we have to start with the question of, okay, we're using abilities that in a natural worldview we can't explain. In a purely material worldview, we can't explain the immaterial world. And that really becomes the presuppositional argument. Okay, is that you first are relying upon God to be able to reason, to know things, to have truth, and to be able to argue that God does not exist. And now I'm kind of looking over
at in the chair in my office here, because I actually have the guy who first discipled me many years ago to see if I'm getting approval on my definition there. I'm getting a thumbs up. All right.
Get him around. Slide your chair over. Get him around.
Yeah, well, I tried. We have a chair over here, but he went to the more comfortable chair, and you know, maybe we can get him on camera. He's wicked smart, and you know, but not the kind of guy I would want to have to be debating. You do need a dictionary when talking with him.
Well, a couple thoughts arise. One, just as a quick correction, it was when you said that you weren't sure, but your recollection was that Matt has gone through how you put it, like there's God or not God, and we actually haven't gotten to that point. You might remember loosely when I was here, we got into this discussion about when I made that little side point about what are the laws of logic, and that was the whole discussion. So we actually never did get to any of the premises or any sort of inspection of worldview or anything like that. So that's not relevant. Just to clarify that I'm not pinning. Not trying to attribute anything that I'm saying in this conversation to something that Matt said, because we actually never got to that point. So what I'm hearing of your point is that I guess I'm hearing your premises then is that one would be that we rely upon God for our reasoning, and you can say whether rely on God for knowledge or whatever else. We rely on God for reasoning. And I think a second premise I heard in there, and in fact arguably is a consequence of the first, is that there wouldn't be reasoning if not for God.
Well, yeah, so there's two different aspects of this. I think you and I both approach everything with certain presuppositions, right? My two presuppositions that I'm holding to is there is a God and he has spoken. And I'm taking those as presuppositions, as axioms, as things that we're accepting without, you know, the need of proof, and you know, things that wouldn't be proven. And you would take the opposite, maybe, that there is no God, and you're gonna evaluate everything from that. Well, okay, so you're shaking your head no. Many professing atheists have it from there is no God, and they start from that point. So here becomes the question. Okay, when we look at what the presuppositional apologetic is, it is really getting to the question of where did reasoning, logic, you know, and all these immaterial things come from. We rely on them, and so the question is, if they can't be a product of a material world, a world without God, then you have God, right? And so that becomes the evidence, because what do we know about things like, I mean, this is in that video, if you go back and you watch the video, we were talking, it was relying on things that you have, that morality, and this is basically his argument, that morality is absolute, that morality is universal, because he's saying that Stalin was a bad person and shouldn't be allowed to go to heaven. And so he's relying on morality being absolute, universal, okay, that it applies to everyone, even Stalin. Well, that's not the case if in an evolutionary system. It is the case where God, it's coming from the nature of God. Okay, so as a Christian, I can account for an absolute morality. I can account for knowledge and laws of logic and all these things. I can account for them. But for someone who denies God, denies the existence of God, then the question becomes, how can they account for these things? And that's the question I constantly answer or ask, and I don't get answers to it. I usually get insults.
Andrew, let me say something, Andrew, because I have always had a difficult time understanding the presuppositional argument in regards to logic. I don't know what it is. I get the moral part. I get the reasoning without God aspect of the presuppositional apologetic, but the logic thing, I've sat here for literally hours and hours listening to Matt Slick describe it, and I've listened to Cy talk about it. I never understood it until I was editing the podcast the other day, and I was going through and I was fast forwarding and going back, and I clicked and I heard Len Pettis say, And I've heard it 1,000 times, but for some reason it clicked this one time. Maybe it's just how dense I am, but maybe this will help some other folks. Is that logic is a property of God. Logic is a property of God. Because God is logical. God everything about logic. God is. Okay, that's one part of His nature, or you could say it's part of His mind, but it's part of who God is. God is logical, and nothing else is. Nothing else is. There's no other explanation for it except that it is a property of who God is.
Yeah, and I was just going to say this, and the cat's meow said it in the thing. It's a reflection of the character and nature of God, and that's just like truth is, just like knowledge is, just like morality is, which really it's the justice, it's righteousness, it's what's right. We know what's right because we get that from the nature of God. Logic comes from the nature of God, and the reason that why do we see everything uniformed in the universe? Because God created it that way, because He is uniformed, okay? Because He's logical. So what you have is God, as from His nature, okay, that we see in the universe. But if there wasn't God, we should not see, I mean, just point blank, we shouldn't see, we should see chaos.
Why is that?
Because if you have uniformity, we shouldn't have that if everything is just these random chances. Okay, you should see randomness. That's what you should see.
Okay. So why is that? Like what you did, you just restated. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mean why would we see randomness?
Yeah.
In a.
Let me put it another way, because this way I can sort of kill two birds with one stone here. Because a moment ago I jotted down here real quick. You said if
we're going to kill birds, I hope they're for dinner.
As long as they're not lions, right? If they can't be I wrote down
if they kill people. Just saying.
I wrote down. I don't know why I wrote this down. If they can't be a product of a material world. Now, I don't know why. What was they? Do you remember saying this a minute ago? I guess you were talking about these things. And I wrote down if they, but I don't know what they is. And if they can't, then what? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they can't be,
logic, knowledge, truth.
Logic, but love.
Love. You know, yeah. I mean, that's.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So if you're saying, well, if they can't be, well, then let's explore that. So can't these things be a product of the material world? And as you say, I mean, it's a very common theme. Whoa. Well, that went wild. It's a very common theme amongst the things you're saying is that there has to be a God for these things to exist. And you say, well, I mean, if these things can't be a product, well, then it follows these other things follow, and you sort of then afford yourself the assumption that, well, of course they can't be a product of the material world. And then now you assert, in kind, it's not a contradiction. You're saying the same thing every time. You're saying that, well, if there weren't a God, then these things just wouldn't be. There wouldn't be some sensibleness to the world. There wouldn't be logical rules and verities for how the world works. There wouldn't be love without God. Now, to me, that's your position, right? And I'm wondering, how do you...
Okay, so...
That's not an argument, that's a position.
Yeah, the question becomes, and this is why I always bring it back to, and I think the easiest one to take it with is the laws of logic and bring it to before there's a human being, because what you're left with ultimately is people will constantly say, when you say that these things are immaterial, they'll say, no, our brain, there's synapses in the brain kicking off, and that's what this is, and constantly you get that. And that's why I always go back to, before there was a human brain, did these things exist? And it's amazing how people will always be like, well, yes. Okay, then it doesn't require a human brain. Now, what I always find funny is once we get to that point, they jump back to it's a product of the human brain. Now, wait a minute. We already established it can't be, right? If these things exist outside of a human brain, then they're not the product of human thinking. Now the question is, so what are they the product of?
It would be like saying, I would go back to the protons again. It would be like saying, are protons a function of the human brain? Well, our expression and our understanding about protons is a function of the human brain. That's interesting as far as it goes, but the universe exists and functions as it does. We don't want to say that the protons themselves are somehow a product of a human brain, given that apparently there's some number of protons in the brain. It just wouldn't make sense. So the universe has these properties. You know, the logical verities appear, as far as I can tell from my small seat on the universe, they appear to persist throughout the world. So I think you and I got to a good place really quickly with this notion that this nature of the universe, these logical verities, were here before us. They're going to be here after, after we're gone. Things raises other issues, so let's set that aside. They don't need us to be the case. We don't need to be in the room for these things to exist, just like protons don't need us to be in the room for them to exist. But then the actual formulation of laws of logic is a product of humanity, but so what? It's just us trying to catalog the world around us. We got to that place very quickly in this conversation, and I'm hoping to delight to the audience so that they didn't have to hear that, the situation you were just describing, that wheel-spinning situation. I hope the audience appreciates us just completely avoiding that big rut. But having said that, where does that get us? So I'm asking you, when you make a statement like, well, there has to be a God for these things to exist. If these things could exist without a God, or could, what did you say? If they can't be without a God, well, then there must. If they can't be a product of the material world, well, then there must be a God. You make that assertion, and then I say, well, okay, how can you justify that assertion?
Yeah. So the assertion.
And then you say, well, other people might say this. So go ahead.
So the assertion would be this: if you have as Einstein had proven that material things can only produce material. They can't produce the immaterial. Therefore, if the material can't produce the material, assuming that that's right, so we're going to take that into assume Einstein was right there. But if a material thing can't produce immaterial things, then the only source for these things is immaterial. Okay, that gets us into an immaterial source for this. Now, what would be that immaterial source? We would argue that this is the proof that God exists. I mean, people are always saying prove God exists. To use science, and I've said this many, many times if you watch these Hangouts, to use science to try to prove that God exists is like me saying to you, Hogtie, I want you to tell me how many feet 8 gallons of water weigh. And you're going to be like, what? You don't measure gallons in feet. And that's right, you don't. It's the wrong measurement. And you don't study immaterial things using science, the study of the material world.
Okay? Yeah, but again, I'm not asking you to use science to prove God or disprove God or anything like that. Like you're answering my question by referring to other answers you've given to other people that have asked different questions. Okay, so my question, and I will try to focus it, maybe it's because I'm a little bit long-winded, but it's just, it appears to be an important pillar of your argument. If we're going to say, well, this is an argument, right, that says, here's a premise well, let's go with like the William Lane Craig phrasing of that thing. If he would say, if there is no God, then there can't be objective moral duties, but there are objective moral duties, therefore there must be a God. Now, I know we're not talking about objective moral duties, but I'm just borrowing that structure of the argument. It appears to me that you're saying that if there isn't a God, there can't be X, and that X can be love or cherry cheesecake or, more relevant to our discussion, the logical verities, just the basic nature of the universe. You're saying that the universe can't be what it is. It can't be organized without God. And then you've also said that, well, without God, we wouldn't expect those regularities to exist. It would just be all chaos. And I'm saying, okay, I get that that's part of your position. Like, is that one of your premises? And then, if so, how do you justify that that's the case?
Well, I mean, the argument from chaos coming from randomness would be a different argument. But the point being is, when you examine these things, the presuppositional argument is to first ask, where did these things come from? What can account for these? And so what I'm arguing is that in an atheistic worldview cannot account for these things.
Okay, so aren't you? Are you saying it's a good idea? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say a Christian worldview can. Go ahead.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you, because is it your position that a worldview or a position that cannot account for these things it should be rejected. Is that your idea? That if you've got a worldview
Yeah.
that can't account for it, then it should that worldview should be rejected.
Yeah, I mean,
Then my next, go ahead, please. Oh, my question was going to be, okay, well then let's go to how does Christianity account for it?
Sure. Well, that's yeah. I mean, we actually Tim actually kind of said it. You know, the way we account for this is that we get these things from the nature of God. So we talk about justice as in the video that we saw earlier today. Where do we get justice from? How can we account for justice? Well, as a Christian, I can account for justice because it comes from the nature of God. God is just, therefore there's justice. Okay? That's how I would account for it. Logic. Well, logic comes from the mind of God. God is logical, therefore there's logic. Therefore the universe he created is logical. You know, truth. We understand what truth is from the nature of God. So each one of these we look at, I can account for them because they come from the nature of God. Now, how do you and I have justice? Right? You and I have a justice system. We have court systems. Even if we live in different countries and we have different rules for those court systems, we have court systems. Yet you don't see the whales having a court system. Even if you want to argue, and so let's give the argument that some might give against this would be something like, you know, and you have different animals you can look at, but I look at the vampire bats because, well, I studied those. So you look at the vampire bats or the emperor penguins, and they argue. The argument is that they have a system of morality, and that's what tries to be played. Because in the case of a vampire bat, they go out at night, they get food, they come back, to stay warm, they all huddle together, and the argument is that if one bat, and this is observed, if a bat does not share the food with the other bats that didn't get food, then all the bats push that bat out of the circle to the outer parts of the circle, and it remains there, and it basically dies of frost. Same thing with the emperor penguins, with, you know, where if they don't, you know, basically keep in this circle where they're moving, they push that one out. Okay, but that's not a justice system. You don't see them discussing that and debating the merits of that. You see them acting upon instinct. You and I have court systems, and we sit and we debate the justice of things. And so that becomes the difference. We can do that because we're made in the image of God, and that's what makes humans different. And so what is that image of God? That image of God is certain attributes that we get from the nature of God, like justice, okay, like a knowledge of right and wrong, like knowledge, truth, intelligence, these different attributes that we get from God. Okay, so when we were created, we got them there, and so that's how I can account for those things.
I think that would take us to a place. I think this conversation sometimes runs aground, so I hope it doesn't. But because I would reject that is being that, well, because that's a property of God, I would reject that as an account. That's more of a sort of a story that fits the data. I mean, what I find interesting, really, and almost amusing, is your example about the penguins or about the bats, like where they have this social behavior that they participate in the welfare of the overall group, and those who fail to participate in that face this contingency where you're not allowed to be part of the group anymore, and you're going to die, and therefore not breed. And gee, atheists don't have an account for that. Well, I mean, there's an obvious evolutionary account, and when I say there's an account for it, I'm saying that the mechanism is something that can be whiteboarded, and you can say, well, the differential breeding success would definitely be a factor here. So, we can actually, what I'm trying to say, we could come up with an account that includes, let's call it a mechanistic account, the mechanisms of how those attributes of penguins or of bats would be explained if evolution turns out to be true. And actually, by the way, it's not even required that you have to believe that part of evolution that says, common ancestry. You don't have to believe that these bats and these penguins and us all have common ancestors in order to accept that this contingency of, well, the bats or the penguins or whatever can freeze to death if they're not going to, play along with, good bat moral social order, right? Even like typical creation evolution would still accept that. So there's an example of justice or morality, whatever you want to call it, in these animals, for which there exists a reasonable account that includes mechanisms.
Well, okay. So
when you say, sorry, just one sentence to wrap this up, and that is, when you say that God explains justice or God explains logic or whatever, I'm going to borrow this expression from somebody else. God is an account for justice in the same way that the god Apollo is an account of the sun going across the sky. I think there was a comment on your video last week.
But here becomes the problem. Okay, your justice that you're describing cannot be absolute and universal.
Okay, is that a problem for you?
Well, it's a problem for you because would you say that Stalin was wrong in what he did, or Hitler, or?
Yes, I would.
Huh?
Would, yeah.
You would, but see, what are you doing? You're appealing to a universal absolute truth.
I don't think that's the case.
Why not? So,
when you say universal, do you mean
it applies to everyone?
Consensus, like unanimous consensus,
no,
or do you mean in every corner of the universe?
Yeah, it applies to everyone.
So unanimous consensus.
Not consensus. Because it's not a consensus; it's absolute. A consensus. This is the whole thing. And because you would rely on consensus, you're not going to get absolute.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
And so I'm saying it's absolute, universal, and it's immaterial, and that can't be accounted for in a material world where there is no immaterial God. You can't explain the immaterial. You can't say it's universal. It can't apply. You can't say Hitler was wrong. You could at best say, I don't agree with him, or my culture doesn't agree with him, but he was right for his culture. That's the best.
I could say a lot. I could say a lot more about it. Although I sense we're now being dragged down this alleyway of talking about morality and the nature of morals. I can't just say, well, it's my opinion. It's chocolate versus vanilla ice cream. That Hitler shouldn't have done that. Is that what I would do is say, well, if we're going to discuss a moral framework, we need to start talking about some, meta-morals, meta-ethics. What are the things that would establish the goals of a moral system? And then from there, I could argue, well, when I say, under my assessment, what Hitler did, what Stalin did was wrong, it's because of this moral framework or moral rubric that we would construct. In any case, even if you want to say that there's absolute morals or whatever else, you immediately put on, which I don't necessarily really concede that point because I don't know what you mean, but it doesn't matter because the general question here is whatever, whether we're talking about justice or morality or love or logic, all these things we've been talking about, you repeatedly go back to that point. These things could not exist were it not for God. Well, and I accept that that's a pillar of your position, but I don't see you making that case.
Okay, so the presuppositional question that would be asked of you is to say, well, where do you get your standard? Because you're already assuming the standard, and I'm going to say, well, where do you get the standard from? And there you're going to have to go back, no matter how far you go back, evolutionarily. You can't have an absolute immaterial universal standard, and you have to go back to God.
Well, in your view, that's the thing. So, I guess what it comes down
in
to
your
is
view, what is going to be your standard for an absolute universal, justice system or morality or laws of logic? Because we already showed how things like the laws of logic do not require a human brain. We don't need humans, so it's not an evolutionary issue.
Yeah, well, that hinges on the false dichotomy that you set up maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago, and that was that it's either evolution or God. Those are actually your words. You said that to explain logic, to explain morality, it's either evolution or it's God. So when we talk about the property of like when did protons start existing? Well, protons either existed or they didn't exist. It's not you can never say protons existed and not protons existed. It wouldn't make sense. You say, well, how did that come to be in the universe? It either came from evolution or it came from God. Well, the face palming would have been like audible in every city of the world if people are thinking you're attributing the logical verities of the universe to evolution.
No, because if there is no God, then how did these things come about? The answer consistently always is humans. And you even said consensus. You said in your own thing evolutionary.
I asked if that's what you meant by it.
Yeah. Okay. But you said that you can explain it through evolution.
Yo. Hey, you asked Hogtie by what standard, and he hasn't answered yet.
Okay. I'd give you a couple different answers. By what standard for what? For morality?
For anything to be right or wrong.
For morality, for laws of logic, for truth, for knowledge, for any of the things we're talking about.
Okay. I could give you any number of answers. I could say I get those things from my mom and dad because I'm 6 years old and everything they say is right and wrong.
Okay, but
I can say,
remember,
I get my standard from my owner because I'm a parrot that lives in a cage.
But hold on.
Hogtie, come on,
Okay,
man.
no,
You're
I'm
running in circles now.
No, I'm not. How is that running in circles?
Because we're talking about an absolute
because we're at that point in the conversation where you say, you're running in circles. We're going to play that
You're
card.
you're just mocking the question.
No, I'm not.
Wait. Hogtie. Wait a minute. Let's take. I know I'm interrupting, so it's my show. So
you can.
Let me go. Let me get specific with you, okay? We're asking you what's the standard, and your answer is, well, I could give you many answers, okay? Just give us the standard that you use for morality.
Okay. Because my point, and I will absolutely will do so, my point there is that what I've asked Andrew for, he's described this as the presuppositional argument. So I've asked him, what is the presuppositional argument? That is, what are the premises, what is the structure of the argument, and what conclusions do you go to?
And I muted you, okay? I muted you. Now, did you not hear what I said? Come on. Okay.
I did. So what I'm doing is my point there, and I will answer your question absolutely. My point there is that when I ask him for the argument, should he not be able to tell me what the argument is without having to poll me?
Hogtie, this is my hangout, and I'm asking you.
Literally,
I'm asking you for your standard. Okay, and you're taking us somewhere else.
Okay, my standard is an assessment of what causes maximal benefit and reduces harm.
No, but
what is your definition? But what is your standard for benefit?
Okay, so this is what we're going to do then. We don't have an argument, so we're going to now ask me a bunch of rabbit trail questions. Okay, so let's follow that rabbit trail.
No. Listen, you said you can account for an absolute universal standard.
At what time stamp did I say I could account for an absolute universal standard?
That was what we were discussing, and you said you can account for it. That's
no, I didn't. I said I could account for the penguin thing and the bat thing.
Okay, can you account for an absolute moral standard, absolute universal moral standard?
I asked you what universal meant. I'm going to go by the definition. My answer is let's say no. I cannot account for that.
So then it's everything subjective.
I didn't say everything was subjective.
It's either universal or it's subjective. There isn't an in between here. It's either objective or subjective.
Okay. Well, those two terms are not in opposition with each other. And again, notice how this takes us away from my question, Andrew. How does this precept argument work? Now we're going to talk about my understanding of moral reasoning.
Okay, so the way that
that's what I mean. Like I don't get.
Yeah, sure. This is the way that presuppositional argument works. We lay out the presuppositions. We show that you can't account for your ability to reason and things like this without God, and then the rest of the discussion does exactly what we're doing, where you run around in circles, and to us you look foolish because you don't even recognize what you're doing, and you're relying on our presuppositions to deny the God that you're relying on.
And I asked you to provide some support for that position. We're at the point in the conversation where once I've asked a question that you can't answer, you then go and you rabbit trail off on these very challenging, very difficult questions about morality, and then you say, oh, you're running around in circles. You got Scotty Boy typing here, Hogtie, you are struggling, and I don't know, whatever else, ducking the question. We got to the point in the conversation where all you guys do is then criticize, and you declare, you're scorekeeping the conversation. You're declaring. You're just declaring, oh, Hogtie's not making sense, whatever. That's what you're doing.
What I'm doing is correcting. You're answering for something that we're not asking, and we're asking for what your standard is. And Rocco, by the way, just so you know, because he says, Rocco says, I hear Andrew's friend laughing in the background. He's making me laugh. Rocco, his name is Rocco P. Just saying. So Rocco P. You gotta be watching that.
There's no way that's true.
Yeah, Rocco P. in the chat is talking about my friend Rocco P. sitting in the chair right there.
Okay, Now I'm going to start, like, that's too much coincidence in the universe, because earlier in the chat there was a Vincent discussion about how rare is it the two Vincents to be together. Now Rocco P. Rare. I didn't think it was that rare. I'm with you on that. But then the Rocco P. thing is just like, that's crazy. No, I think, I don't know.
Some people say miracles don't happen.
Yeah. I had a question about miracles, but I was going to say that for when Mr. Slick returns. No, I think we're at that. I think we're at that point in the conversation. I mean, my take on this. So I liked your description, Andrew, of what the presuppositions are. And I'll tell you one thing. I wrote it down because I like that. There is a God, and He has spoken. The phrase "and He has spoken," some people might take as vague, but I don't, because I think I know what you mean. And I'm like, that's so great to be able to pack that presupposition into just a few words. So when I hear that, I hear that's your understanding of the world, and it helps me understand your understanding of the world. And when I point out to you that, you know, what I'm hearing from you is the repeated declaration that, well, without this God, there simply couldn't be these things that we identify. And I ask for, well, you know, can you back that statement up? You're literally saying that if this God didn't exist, then there could not possibly be all of these things, you know, like list 12 different things.
What we then do is ask you to account for your worldview with the real world view that we see, and what you end up doing. And this isn't against you. This is
I get it. You do it to everybody. I get it. Yeah.
We all, every one of us, every one of us have the presuppositions. Okay, that's reality. Yeah. Every one of us knows that. I mean, why is it we always go to Hitler or someone like that? Because we all know what he did was wrong.
Or baby rape.
Yeah, I mean
that's an over. Can I just say that's an overused example?
Okay, let me give you the example I use. All right, let me ask you this: do you, Hogtie, believe that the act of rape is wrong?
Yes.
Okay. On what basis do you think that the act of rape is wrong?
Because in any system where you define right and wrong as the, you know, increasing benefit, decreasing harm to people, rape, as we understand it in every context, is something that's not beneficial. It's harmful.
Okay.
Consequentialism. What do you want to call it? That?
What makes it harmful?
That's one of those questions that's so obvious. How the heck do you answer that question? What makes it harmful? I don't know. I mean, again, I'm trying to keep my answers brief on this point because, again, it's my view that when you do this, you're asking very difficult questions, very challenging questions, and you do it as a way of putting the other person on the hot seat. I've asked you for your argument, and what you've given me is your position, and I accept that, and I respect that that's your position. That's fine, but you're not giving me an argument. So now you're asking me these very challenging questions, and I could answer the question. But I'm just trying to illustrate for you that what you're doing when you ask me those things, I have to okay, what is wrong about rape? That's so obvious that I literally don't know how to find words for it. But okay.
No, I'm doing. Let me just say, because what I'm trying to do, Hogtie, is I'm actually, the reason I'm asking these questions is I want to walk you down and have you think through it. Asking questions is a Socratic model of teaching. Forces a person to not just spit some answer out, but to think about it. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about it because this is going to help you see the answers. I gave you the model. I did explain it. But now what I want to do is I'm taking it at a different tact and trying to show how your model can account for these things. And I'm going to do that by asking questions so that you can think through it.
Okay, before we do that, if it's the case that I cannot hit bedrock with my model, that is, I cannot come down to the very bottom thing about where these morals come from, that means my moral system and or worldview should be rejected? Is that going to be your position?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't account for it...
So when I turn around and do the same thing to you in 3 minutes, unless I get kicked off the show first, you will have to reject your own worldview? Because you can't hit bedrock with your system either. We know. I'm doing that because we know where you're going to go. You're going to say, well, what I'm going to say? Well, why is it bad to take somebody else's parking spot? I say, well, because that inconveniences them. Well, what's wrong with inconveniencing them? Well, because it hurts their feelings. What's wrong with hurting their feelings? Well, because we want to do good for people and not do harm. Well, why do we have to do good for people? Want to do harm? Seitan Brukenkate asked me, well, what would be wrong if somebody just pushed a button and blew up the whole world? Why is that wrong? You know?
Well, here's the reason I'm asking. We would agree that doing harm is wrong, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So most people are going to argue that rape is wrong because it does harm to the victim, and that's the obvious thing, like you were saying.
Yeah. Well, there's more to it than that.
Right.
Having rapists around is actually harmful to just everybody around. You know, the victim obviously a lot. I suppose you could contrive circumstances where it's really not that harmful, but that would be weird to come up with an example where you try to come up with some weird thing about how the victims.
No, it's not hard at all. It's reality here in my state.
Okay.
In New Jersey, we had a dentist who was convicted. What he was basically doing was he was sedating women, and he was raping them.
Okay, and is this a fair characterization of when we discuss rape in its generality, that this is what we mean when we're talking about rape?
Well, we remember the question I asked is the act of rape wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So you said the act of rape was wrong, and the argument is if the act of rape is wrong, the act itself, then it should be universally wrong in all cases. So what makes it wrong? Well, if the standard is that it harms a person, well, here's a case where there were dozens of women, they weren't harmed. In fact, they didn't know anything about it until one got pregnant. And she ended up being able to figure out that this must be what happened, because it was the only time she was in the presence of a man that, you know, and where she was not aware of what was happening, and, you know, so it turned out that they were able to prove that not only did he do it to her, but to many women. Okay, and so they were able to find this. But so what caused the harm was not the rape. What caused the harm to these other women was discovering what happened to them. That's when they had trauma, and that's when they were harmed. So, therefore, if we're going to stay consistent with the thinking, the act of rape is not wrong. It was finding out you were raped that's wrong.
Oh, wow, I don't know who's thinking that would be consistent with. I don't think that's what you think. It's certainly not what I think.
It's not what I think. But see, I can.
Good. I'm relieved to hear that.
I would say rape
crazy.
But see, rape is wrong because God's not a rapist. That's why rape is wrong, because it violates the nature of God. So I can account for it. But hold on, let's finish it. If the argument is that rape, the act of rape is wrong because it harms people, I just gave a scenario, and all I have to do is give one scenario where the premise fails, and then we reject that argument.
I would say that Andrew doesn't even need to go there, because who says harm is wrong?
Yeah.
Well, why is harm wrong?
No, I think that's a very good question, and that's what I was going to say. Well, who says harm is wrong? Well, you can, obviously that's worked in most moral systems. It's not at the bedrock of yours. You say it is, because just as Andrew had said, what was the last thing you said, Andrew? That harm is not nature of God. Give me that line again. Harm is God's not a rapist. That's what it was. The things that are good are things that are in God's nature, and the things that are not good are those things that are not in God's nature. So why is that? Why ought we do the things? So, okay, I shouldn't be a rapist. You're going to tell me I shouldn't be a rapist. Why not? Well, because God's not a rapist. Okay, so why should I worry about what's in God's nature for when I choose to be a rapist or a thief or a charitable person?
We should be conforming to the image of God.
Why should we be conforming to the image of God?
Because that's why He created us.
So why should we worry about conforming to the image of the person that created us?
Because that's what He says. I mean, because He sets the rules. That's actually the.
Why should we do the things? Because He set the rules.
Because He's in a position where He can. So I laid out my presuppositions. What are your presuppositions?
No. I'm sorry. Can we not finish this? Because you asked me, and I conceded we're never going to hit bedrock with my moral system. I'm going to say, oh, but it's bad when you harm people. It's bad when you inconvenience people. It's good when you do beneficial things for people. And you're going to say, but then why, as Tim just said, why is it bad to harm people? And, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. And at some point, you're just never going to hit bedrock on mine. Because if you were to ask me at the very bottom of, like, what is the thing that really supports my moral system? Well, what's beneath that? What motivates that? Well, I don't know, because if I knew what that was, well, then that would be the thing at the bottom. So now it's, okay, great, I can't do that, so we should reject my worldview, my whole moral system, my moral rubric. So now, Andrew, go ahead. Why is it bad to be a rapist?
Wait a minute. Did you just say that there's no justification for your worldview and you can't explain it at all?
According to Andrew's approach. That's why I asked him before he went into it. I said, are you taking the position right now that if we can't hit bedrock, if I can't hit bedrock with my moral system, that it should be rejected? I'm now saying, well, guess what? So we're going to follow Andrew's rule, that if we can't hit bedrock with it, out the window it goes.
Okay.
So we couldn't hit bedrock with mine, so boom, out it goes.
So let's go with it. You asked me, so why is rape wrong? Because rape violates the nature of God.
Okay, why is it wrong to violate the nature of God?
Because he is the creator.
Why is it wrong to violate the nature of the Creator?
Because he decreed it that way.
Why is it wrong to violate the nature of the Creator who decreed it to be that way?
Ownership.
We're never going to hit bedrock here.
No,
why is it?
Because he is by his nature, being the creator of the universe, he has the right. In a smaller sense, where a parent has the right to be obeyed by a child, he has the right by being the creator. In his words in Romans, he's the potter. The clay doesn't say to the potter how to make things, how to make it.
Okay.
He has the right as the creator to create us any way that he wants. We have, by his position of ownership, we obey.
Okay. Then why is it an imperative for you? Why do you see it as right to respect his right? Remember the right you just described? That God has that position, he has that right. Why is it your moral responsibility to,
because I was created in his image? I mean, you said I wouldn't hit bedrock. I've hit bedrock.
By the way, before when you were talking about going around in circles, that's a circle.
That's not a circle.
Right now. You are. You just keep talking. Well, he's the creator. He's allowed to do that. Why should we follow? Why? Like what is the motivation?
Because he created us. Because that's.
Why is it important to follow the will of the person that
created you?
Go for
it,
Rocco.
Because it's been revealed. That's it. That's all. It's been revealed to us.
Okay. Well, then why is it a moral imperative to do what's revealed to you? My point is, we're never going to hit bedrock with this.
But we did. No. The irony is, you say we're never going to hit bedrock, and we've hit it. You know, I've hit it.
Let's define.
Gotcha.
Define bedrock is the. I think we agree on the definition. The fundamental principle on which something is based. Fundamental principle on which something is based.
That almost sounds like a presupposition.
Yeah.
And I can account for mine. I even gave mine. You haven't given yours, and you haven't accounted for yours, and that's the difference. Okay.
Well,
I gave my presuppositions. I accounted for them.
You didn't account for them. You gave a story when you talk about logic. No, we haven't. I mean, if what you're saying qualifies as bedrock, if you're saying, well, it's important to me that I honor the will of the Creator. It's important to me that I mold myself in the image of our Creator. And say, well, that's my bedrock. Okay, well, now I can say, oh, it's important to me that I follow all the rules of Scientology. Like, I can just make anything be a bedrock.
Should your children obey you?
Just another example. Wait a minute. Let's point this out. Just another example that Hogtie, just to make an argument, he abandoned his atheism and adopted
That's not true. That's
Scientology.
Adopted Scientology. That's not true. We don't want to divert on that now necessarily, but I would love to at some point pick up this wonky, clunky argument about you have to, like when you talk about the precept, we say, oh, well, you're presupposing that God is real. And I didn't pick you up on this thing about, well, what do you mean by God? Because we have that discussion. I know what you mean by God as best as I can understand being outside your head. And then somebody's going to say, well, maybe I think a baked potato can be God. And then you go, oh.
I can tell you that being inside my head is a scary thing, and you wouldn't want to be there.
Okay. Let me thank everybody here. We are an hour over what I normally stay up for.
I thought you started.
Yeah, I did start late.
Okay.
But we're going to continue on Mixlr. I don't know how long Andrew Rappaport's going to hang around. We have other Christian apologists in this hangout. We're going to continue on Mixlr. So I will be posting, again, the link to go to BibleThumpingWingnut /Mixlr or Mixlr /BibleThumpingWingnut to listen, Okay? So the hangout portion is going to end. Thank you, Hog Tie. It got lively when you arrived. I appreciate that. Also, anybody, somebody will watch this and get this message to Nephilim Free. Okay, Nephilim Free has been saying that he would enjoy a debate with a Calvinist. Please, someone tell Nephilim Free to email me at BibleThumpingWingnut@gmail.com. BibleThumpingWingnut@gmail.com. Nephilim Free would love to host a debate. It doesn't have to be with Matt Slick. I've got other people in mind that I would even enjoy listening to more than Matt Slick do a debate on Calvinism. So please, somebody send this to Nephilim Free. Email me at BibleThumpingWingnut@gmail.com. And everybody who's watching, if you want to leave a comment that I will actually read, email it to me. Okay, because there's way too many comments on these videos that I have no time to read all of them. So this hangout is going to continue on Mixler. You'll be able to listen to the discussion, but the video portion on Google is going to end. I'm not sure how long Andrew Rappaport's going to hang around because he's got guests at his house, but I know Matt Yester is here, Rocco is here, and other Christian apologists.
I'm going to try to bring Rocco P. on, who's here.
Okay, so that being said, thanks everybody for watching. Next week, I believe that Matt Slick will be back, and thank you everybody for watching, and may God bless, truly bless, all of you. Thanks for watching.